Some of the most important people I ever lost didn't drift all at once. They slipped away slowly, like boats untied in the night. In this story, I'm going to tell you about a boat that shouldn't have returned, a man I thought I'd never see again, and the moment the past came floating back to shore, literally. It's a story about silence, second chances, and the part of ourselves we try to leave behind, but never really do. So grab your coffee, settle in, and listen close. Because this one isn't just about a missing boat. It's about friendship, regret, redemption, and what the ocean gave back when I was finally ready to receive it. They say the sea gives you answers only if you learn to wait. Some people retire and chase leisure. Others retire and chase youth. I chased quiet, not because I was exhausted, but because I was noisy on the inside. After a lifetime of managing volatility, both in markets and in men, I finally sold my last position, canceled every subscription, ignored every phone call, and came here, to this nameless beach, to this overlooked corner of the map where time doesn't follow the clock. I never told anyone who I was. I didn't need to. The ocean doesn't care about your credentials, and neither do the birds, or the wind, or the tide. They just want you to show up present. So I did. I bought a small plot of land near the water, built a modest hut with my hands, and let go of the world. These days, I fish when I'm hungry, read when it rains, and think when the wind is soft. My only technology is this old camera phone, which I use to film a few thoughts each week for whoever needs them. A quiet channel, no name, no face, just words, just reflection. And every morning I sit under the crooked tamarind tree with a cup of black coffee, watching the same stretch of sea and watching Peso. Peso isn't a person. He's not a dog. Peso is a boat, 10 feet long, hand-built, rough around the edges, scratched and seasoned by time. His wood is pale and blistered by the sun with 3 old repairs I made myself using rope, resin, and patience. He's light enough for the tide to carry, and heavy enough to matter when it does. I named him Peso, after the heaviest thing I've ever carried, the illusion of control. You see, on Wall Street, we're taught that control is power, that outcomes can be engineered, people can be managed, markets can be dominated. We build portfolios like castles and believe they're stormproof, but they never are. The truth is, most of what matters in life, trust, timing, people, is wildly out of your hands. You don't manage it, you align with it. That's something I didn't understand when I was younger, but Peso helped teach me. This morning, like most mornings after a night of strong winds, Peso was not where I left him. His rope, frayed and pulled from the stake, lay limp on the sand, pointing seaward like a breadcrumb trail. He was drifting slowly just beyond the reef, still visible but already losing direction. There was no panic in me. I sipped the last of my coffee, grabbed the long bamboo pole I keep by the tree, and stepped into the cool morning tide. The water wrapped around my legs like memory, chilling, familiar, alive. Years ago, I would have shouted for help, drafted a protocol, blamed someone, delegated it, solved it with force. Now, I just walked. Peso bobbed in a soft loop, caught between curiosity and confusion. The wind wasn't strong, but steady enough to nudge him outward, and if I waited too long, he'd pass the outer edge and be gone. Still, I didn't run. I watched, because that's the thing about leadership, real leadership. It's not about rescue, it's about attunement. You don't save something by panicking. You save it by knowing when to act and when to wait, when to push and when to let it find its way back. I waited out, bamboo pole in hand, never shouting, never splashing, just approaching, just present. Peso spun slightly in the current, his bow shifting toward me, then away. Testing, thinking. When I got close enough, I lowered the pole into the water, letting its tip touch the edge of the boat. No command, no pulling, just contact. And slowly, almost lazily, Peso turned. That's the part that still amazes me. Not that he turned, but how little it took. Not effort, not pressure, just presence and direction. I guided him back with the pole, using only subtle gestures, adjusting my position in the water like a dance. As he neared the shallows, the tide carried him the last few feet to the sand. It reminded me of countless people I'd once managed. Young traders, anxious founders, seasoned executives lost in noise. So many didn't need to be pushed. They just needed to be heard, to be seen, to be reminded. They weren't broken, just out of alignment, just like Peso. And the truth is, I was out of alignment too, more often than I'd ever admit, especially near the end. The weight of winning had become heavier than the cost of losing. My mind, like the tide, had started pulling me away from the shore of who I was. That's why I came here. That's why I built this life. That's why I film these reflections, for those still adrift, who think they need fixing, when really, they just need recentering. As I watched Peso rest on the shore, I became aware of another presence behind me, a voice, young and hesitant. Grandpa, was he really going to drift away? I turned. It was Logan, my grandson, barefoot in the sand, holding the broken rope in his hand. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with realization. For a while, maybe, I said. But he found his way back. He studied the boat, then the rope, then the water. But what if he didn't? I let the question hang in the salt air. There's something beautiful about not answering right away. In silence, the answer grows. Then we go get him, I said at last. But we don't run, we don't yell. We go calm, we go patient. Logan nodded slowly, his fingers brushing the rope. Do you think people are like Peso too? I smiled. Most are. They don't forget. They just drift. And it's not our job to control them. Just to be there when they're ready to come back. We sat together on the edge of the dune, watching the waves brush the hull of the boat, and that's when I saw something strange, another set of drag marks in the sand. Faint, but different from Peso's. Shorter, deeper, new. I stood, followed. The trail for a few steps, heart tightening. The marks led down the shore and vanished into the surf. There had been another boat. I hadn't noticed it missing, and it was already gone. I turned toward the horizon, heart pounding now, not with fear, but with a deeper question. Who else had been drifting while I wasn't looking? It's strange how silence can grow heavier than noise. The moment Logan spotted the second set of drag marks, everything around us seemed to slow. The breeze, the tide, even the birds fell quiet, as if the beach itself was holding its breath. What began as a quiet lesson with a drifting boat had deepened into something else. A question, an absence, a subtle disturbance in the rhythm of our morning. We stood together, barefoot in the sand, following the faint trail with our eyes. It stretched from the tree line to the shoreline, two grooves about a foot apart pressed into the wet sand, similar to Peso's tracks, but not the same. These were deeper, tighter, as if the boat had been heavier or dragged more urgently. Was there another boat? Logan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, like speaking it too loud might summon something. I nodded slowly. There was. Smaller than Peso, older. Where is it? Gone, I said. It shouldn't be. He looked at me expecting more, and I felt the weight of my own words settle on my shoulders like the morning fog that sometimes clings to this beach. I hadn't used that second boat in years, hadn't even looked at it in months. It sat up by the rocks, partially covered by a canvas tarp and shaded by palms. I had always meant to repair it, one more project I started, then let time forget. But someone, or something, had taken it. Logan didn't say anything more. He just stood there, eyes narrowed slightly, trying to put something together in his young mind, that he didn't yet have the pieces for. We spent the rest of the morning combing the shoreline. Not searching, exactly. Just observing. Reading the subtle signs. Shells overturned. Footprints half erased. Nothing conclusive, but enough to stir the feeling that we weren't as alone out here as we once believed. After an hour, we returned to the hut. I boiled water for tea, and Logan sat on the edge of the porch, swinging his legs silently. I could feel the questions forming behind his eyes. I could feel my own answers rising and resisting all at once. That's when I opened the old leather satchel I kept tucked under my cot. Inside were remnants of a life I no longer lived, ledgers, notes, photographs, and a letter I never mailed. A letter addressed to a man named Cole. Cole wasn't just my partner. He was my opposite in almost every way. Brash where I was measured, bold where I was cautious. He was the fire, I was the frame. Together, we built a firm that grew from 2 desks and a printer in a subleased office to a global powerhouse with 40 analysts, 6 floors of glass and concrete, and billions under management. But fire, unmanaged, burns everything, and frames, when too rigid, snap under pressure. We hadn't spoken in over 10 years. The last conversation we had wasn't really a conversation. It was a rupture. A disagreement about an acquisition that became a shouting match, then a standoff, then a silence that lasted a decade. I walked away that day thinking I was right. Maybe I was. But being right and staying connected don't always go hand in hand. I reread the letter slowly. The handwriting looked older now, more fragile, like it belonged to someone else. In it, I had written, "We didn't lose the deal, Cole. We lost each other. And I'm starting to think one of those matters more than the other." I folded the letter back up and stared out at the beach, the missing boat, the broken rope, the fading marks in the sand. They weren't just events, they were echoes of moments I'd let slip, relationships I hadn't tied down well enough, conversations I never finished. And now Logan was here, watching, listening, learning, not from what I said, but from what I did. "Grandpa," he said, "do you think someone took it?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "Maybe." "Do you think they'll bring it back?" "That depends," I said, "on why they took it in the first place." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" I considered that for a moment. How do you explain to a child that not all thefts are crimes? Some are cries, some are survival. Some are someone drifting so far they forget which shore they came from. "Sometimes," I said, "people don't take things because they want them. They take them because they're lost." He was quiet after that, and I was grateful for the quiet. That night, after Logan went to sleep, I walked the shore again. The moon was full, casting silver trails across the water. The tide had pulled further out, exposing new ridges in the sand, and for a moment, I saw another set of footprints I hadn't noticed before. Faint, but present. Adult-sized. Barefoot. Someone else had been here. That was the moment I stopped thinking about the boat and started thinking about the person behind it. Was it someone I knew? A neighbor? A stranger washed up from a nearby village? Or was it someone from my past? I thought of Cole again, of how much he had loved the ocean, of the rumors I had heard through old contacts that he had vanished from the business world 2 years ago, that he'd bought land somewhere south, that he had disappeared without a word. I never confirmed any of it. I didn't want to. I told myself I didn't care. But now, staring at those footprints, I wasn't so sure. Was it possible? Could he be here? I didn't sleep that night. My mind drifted just like Peso had, circling, looping, resisting the shore. I wrote. Pages and pages. Not for Logan, not for Cole, for myself. To understand why something as small as a missing boat had shaken something so deep. The next morning, Logan woke before me. He was already down by the water, skipping stones. I watched him for a while before joining him. "You were up late," he said, not looking away from the horizon. I was thinking, about the other boat? Yes, and other things. He skipped another stone. It bounced twice, then sank. "Do you ever wish you could undo something?" he asked. I took a breath. More often than I'd like to admit. He nodded, like he already knew that would be my answer. We stood in silence for a while. Then Logan said something that surprised me. "If I took the boat, would you be mad?" I turned to look at him. "Did you?" "No," he said quickly. "But if I had, I'd want to know why," I said. "And I'd hope you'd trust me enough to tell me." He nodded again, slowly. That was when we saw it. Far out, just on the edge of the reef, something floating. It was too far to make out clearly. But it was moving, not fast, not frantic, just steady, and it was coming this way. Not fast, not frantic, just steady. And it was coming this way. At first, it looked like the tide was playing a trick, pushing some half-rotted log or lost piece of driftwood toward shore. But no, the object held shape, direction, purpose. There was no wind, no engine, no sail. It floated of its own will, or the will of something inside it. Logan stood frozen at my side, barely breathing. I handed him the binoculars without speaking, watching as he raised them with trembling hands. "I think," he whispered, "there's someone on it." He passed the binoculars back, and I pressed them to my eyes. There he was, slumped, motionless, draped over the side like a rag tied to the rail. At first I thought he might be asleep, or worse, but then he stirred, barely. A shift in posture, a twitch of the hand, a head lifting just slightly, as if to acknowledge the nearness of land. My chest tightened. My knees buckled slightly under the weight of recognition. I knew that shape, the slope of his shoulders, the stillness that wasn't fear, but exhaustion. I had seen it before, years ago, when we pulled 16-hour days in glass towers and closed. Our eyes only long enough to forget what we were chasing. "Grandpa?" Logan's voice was small. "Is it him?" I lowered the binoculars. "I think it is. Mark Donnelly. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not on this side of the world, not after all these years." And yet, as the sea brought him slowly toward us, it felt inevitable. As if this moment had been set in motion long before either of us realized. I didn't run, not yet. I couldn't. My body had gone still. Still like Peso had gone in the water, waiting to see what the tide would do next. He was alive. But something in the way he sat, sunburnt, slouched, like the sea had wrung every ounce of will from his bones, told me he wouldn't be for long if we didn't act fast. "Logan," I said, trying to sound calm, "I need you to go to the cottage. Use the radio. Tell the Coast Guard we have a man approaching the beach in a small boat. Lone occupant. Weak, but alive. Tell them to hurry." He nodded and ran. I turned back to the water. The boat was no more than a few hundred yards out now, coasting on a thin current. I moved toward the surf, my feet sinking into wet sand, the sea curling around my ankles. As I approached, the shape in the boat shifted again. He raised a hand, just barely. A lifeless wave. A flicker of recognition, as if even from that distance, he knew it was me. A minute passed. Then another. The boat creaked into the shallow surf and bumped against the shore. It made a soft sound, more like a sigh than an arrival. And there he was, Mark, sun-chapped, skin blistered, beard weeks old, eyes swollen and rimmed in red. But unmistakable. I reached for the edge of the boat. He looked up. "Took you long enough," he rasped. Even in that moment I laughed. It came from somewhere low, like air escaping a closed room. "You arrogant bastard," I muttered. He collapsed into my arms. We carried him into the cottage, Logan and I, and laid him on the couch. He didn't protest. Didn't speak again for several minutes. Just lay there with his eyes closed, mouth cracked open, breathing shallow. I brought him water. He drank in small sips. Logan fetched towels and blankets. We stripped his jacket, salt-stained and stiff, and covered him as gently as we could. His wrists were scraped raw, his knuckles torn. He'd been fighting something, or everything. The radio on the wall crackled. Coast Guard confirmed they were inbound. ETA, 20 minutes. I said we had him. Alive, barely. They asked if he was responsive. Not entirely, I answered. But he knows where he is. I looked at Logan, who hadn't spoken since we brought Mark in. He hovered nearby, arms crossed tightly, eyes darting between me and the stranger on our couch. You okay? I asked. Logan nodded, then whispered, He's your friend? I paused, then, he was, a long time ago. Logan's eyes lingered on me for a moment longer, then he sat quietly by the door. The silence filled the room. Only the creak of the cottage, the occasional chirp of a gull outside, and Mark's breathing interrupted the stillness. Then, quietly, Mark spoke. You really live out here? I turned toward him. He hadn't opened his eyes. Yes. For how long? Since I left. Left what? He murmured. I hesitated. Everything. A flicker of a smile curled at his cracked lips. Smart move. You don't look like you think that. He opened one eye. Yeah, well, I was stubborn. I pulled a chair close and sat beside him. The quiet stretched again. You didn't tell me where you were going, I said. You didn't ask. That stung, because it was true. You disappeared, I added. Sold your share, walked away. Never even... He cut me off with a gesture. Don't, I know. A long pause. I sent a letter once, he added. Didn't mail it. Thought I'd wait till I had something better to say. So did I. We both chuckled, bitter and soft. Then, after a minute, Why now? I asked, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? Why come here? He opened both eyes then, looked. Straight at me. I didn't, he said. I frowned. You didn't what? I didn't come here. I was headed south. Engine gave out 2 days ago. Lost my bearings. Drifted. I felt the bottom drop out of my chest. You didn't mean to. Find me? He shook his head slowly. Didn't even know you were here. I sat back. So you just ended up here. Looks that way. He coughed. Dry, painful. I handed him more water. He drank. When he finished, he looked at me again. Or maybe the ocean knew something. We didn't. The Coast Guard arrived shortly after. 2 men in crisp uniforms entered, checked Mark's vitals, asked questions, loaded him onto a stretcher. They said he was dehydrated, sun exposed, likely concussed. They were impressed he lasted this long. I asked to go with him, but they said only family. Mark groaned. He is family, he muttered. I looked at him. His eyes were closed again, but his hand reached slightly toward mine. I gripped it. The moment passed. The crew wheeled him out. Before they closed the ambulance door, one of them turned and said, He's lucky to be alive. You probably saved his life. I nodded. But deep down, I knew something else. He had saved mine, too. That night, after Logan went to bed, I walked back to the beach alone. Peso sat quiet on the shore. Still, watching. I approached it, sat beside it, and placed my hand on its hull. There was something strange about all of it. The timing, the drift, the second boat, the letter. The fact that, without even trying, we had been brought together again, when so many years had passed in silence. The sea gives you answers only if you learn to wait. I had waited. And somehow, against all logic, the ocean had brought him to me. Looked up at the stars, cold and endless. Then I whispered to the night, "Now what do I do with this second chance?" Behind me, the wind shifted, and far down the beach, a third set of drag marks began to appear in the sand. A third set of drag marks began to appear in the sand. At first, I thought it was a trick of the wind, or maybe some older trail uncovered by the shifting tide. But the beach was still. No breeze, no birds, no sign of human movement. And yet there they were, two parallel grooves cutting a clean path across the damp shore, starting just above the tide line and inching slowly inland. I blinked, leaned forward, held my breath. The marks deepened. No sound accompanied them. No footprints. No shadows. Just the silent progression of something, or someone, being pulled, or pulling themselves, up through the sand. But I saw nothing. My first instinct was to call for Logan, but I didn't. This moment didn't belong to him. It belonged to me, to my past, to whatever unfinished business the sea had decided to bring home. I stood slowly, heart pounding with an ancient rhythm I hadn't felt in years. My body moved on its own, drawn toward the forming tracks. Each step felt heavier, like the air had thickened, like time itself was folding. As I got closer, I began to see what I hadn't before. A second boat. It was wedged at the far end of the beach, almost entirely hidden by brush and shadow. Smaller than Peso, rougher, weather-beaten. Its hull cracked, one side slumped as if it had been dragged from great distance. And no name painted on it, just blank wood, scarred and silent. But the drag marks, fresh, undeniable, originated from its base, and they were leading straight to the cottage. I knelt beside them, touched the grooves with my fingertips. Still, soft. The sand was warm, but here, in the track's center, it felt cold, as if whatever had made them wasn't quite from here. A sudden gust of wind stirred my hair. I looked up, expecting the sky to have changed, but it hadn't. Still night, still stars, still me, still this. And then I heard it. Footsteps, behind. Me, not Logan's. He was asleep. I had tucked him in myself. These were slower, more deliberate, like someone carrying the weight of their own story. I turned and saw a man, but not a man. He stood just beyond the brush, half in light, half in shadow. His clothes were salt-stained, tattered. His hair stuck to his forehead, matted by wind or water. His face was impossible, because it was mine, or rather, what mine might have been. Younger, harsher, sharper, eyes cold, calculating, shoulders squared like a man still carrying his empire on his back. The version of me that never left the tower. The version that stayed, that fought, that won, but never stopped fighting. The version I buried. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me, studied me. Then he tilted his head. "You really traded it all for this?" he asked. His voice was familiar. My voice, but harder, smoother, corporate. I didn't answer. He stepped forward, leaving no prints in the sand. "I've been watching," he said. "You talk a lot about peace, about letting go, about alignment." His lips curled. "But we both know why you left." I clenched my fists, unsure if I was dreaming. "You were afraid," he continued, "not of failure, of success, of becoming everything you swore you wouldn't. And you were. For a while." I shook my head. "That's not true." He laughed. "Isn't it?" He circled me, slow and quiet, like a predator that already knows it's won. "You want to believe you changed. That this version of you, the man on the beach, the grandfather with the wooden boat, is the real one. But I remember the truth." He stopped in front of me, leaned in close. "You didn't change. You hid." I swallowed. Hard. "Maybe," I whispered. "At first. But not now." "No," I said, firmer this time. Not now. He studied me, then nodded. Once, and smiled. Then why am I still here? The question sliced through me. I didn't have an answer, not right away, but somewhere beneath the surface, beneath the waves, beneath the scars, something old shifted, and I understood. I didn't bury you, I said softly. I brought you with me. He raised an eyebrow. You're not just who I was, I continued. You're still part of me. The part that survived, that remembers, that knows how to fight. I stepped closer. But I don't need you to lead anymore. The smile faded. He looked down at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. Then, back at me, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. You don't need me? He asked. I do, I said, but not the way I used to. I don't need the war. I need the wisdom, the precision, the grit. He nodded slowly, and something in him softened. I see. The wind picked up again, and just like that, he began to fade, not violently, not with a scream, but gently, like fog dissolving in sunlight. And as he disappeared, he whispered, "Don't forget what it cost." Then he was gone, and I was alone again. The next morning, I woke with the sunrise. Logan was already on the porch, sipping cocoa and sketching in his notebook. When I stepped out, he looked up and smiled. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. Better than I expected. We walked the beach together. No drag marks, no second boat. Just Peso, still resting quietly where we left him. We stood in silence for a long time. Then Logan asked, "Will your friend come back?" I thought about Mark, about his journal, about the man I saw on the beach, and I said, maybe he never really left. Logan didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. We spent the day preparing Peso for a new coat of paint. Logan chose the color, green-blue, like the sea just after dawn. He said it looked like hope. I didn't argue. That evening, the Coast Guard called. Mark was recovering well, dehydrated, sun-exhausted, but awake, talking, asking for me. I told them I'd be there by morning. Logan smiled when I told him. "Think he came here for a reason," he said. I nodded. So do I. And as the stars returned to the sky, I sat under the crooked tamarind tree, just as I had on the very first day, and thought about everything the sea had given back to me. Not in gold, not in glory, but in grace, and in the soft pull of a current I had finally learned to trust. They say the sea gives you answers, only if you learn to wait. I did, and it brought me back to myself, not fast, not frantic, just steady. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. If this story stirred something in you, good. That means you're still listening to the quiet things, the important things. Out here, the world moves slower, but the lessons go deeper. And sometimes, the best investments we ever make aren't in markets or companies, but in people, in moments, and in making peace with the parts of ourselves we used to run from. Take care of your time. Take care of your people. And if something drifts out of reach, don't be afraid to go get it. I'll see you next time.